powerful vibrato sets a musician apart. It's a mark of experience, an attention to detail, sort of an eye for the more subtle things. It really marks a musician's maturity, right? When someone has really good vibrato, you just know that they're a mature musician. Now you can attain good vibrato over time by just allowing it organically to develop. You slowly over time, it's sort of an evolutionary process. You change your physicality to get to what you're hearing, but it's largely unconscious. If you want fast, dramatic results on vibrato, you really do have to focus in on the technique itself. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today you will learn a couple of techniques to develop really great vibrato. Who doesn't want great vibrato? Now, great vibrato, that might be subjective, right? What you think is really great vibrato, I might not like as much as some other vibrato, right? Like, for example, I'm not a real fan of Kirk Hammett's vibrato, but I love Jimi Hendrix vibrato. So it's subjective. I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that no matter what style of vibrato you prefer, these are the elements that you really have to focus on to bring your vibrato to a place. Whatever that place is, whatever your preference is, it's these common elements that you can work on that get your vibrato up to speed much, much faster than anything else. Okay, so I'm going to explain what those elements are, right? We're going to talk a little bit about the physicality of vibrato itself. What's actually going on, and what are these elements that you can actually focus on. Then we're going to zoom in. I'm going to show you how to isolate those elements so that you can actually really focus on them and sort of break them out and really work on those things, and in turn that will have a dramatic effect on your vibrato. Okay, so before we get going, let's just talk about what vibrato is. On Wikipedia, it is the regular and pulsating change of pitch. So you have a pitch, and then applied to that pitch is a regular pulsating change to the pitch, right? You're raising and returning the pitch, right? That's what vibrato is. Now, as guitar players on a fretted instrument, and musicians in general, there are only two things you can really control about how this happens. One is, what is the variance of pitch, right? How far does that pitch change? And we call that the width of the vibrato. So shallow vibrato might sound like this. Wide vibrato of the same note might sound like this. You can get really, really wide. Like Van Halen's vibrato was extremely wide. And then the other thing is what is the rate at which that pitch changes? And we call that speed. So there's width of the pitch change, and then there's speed, right? So slow vibrato, fast vibrato, right? So speed and width are the only two things we can really control. Turns out that controlling those two things on the guitar is a bit of a physics exercise. So when you dive into this, you really sort of discover that there's a lot going on. So let's zoom in and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so what are the elements that make good vibrato? And again, doesn't matter if you like Kirk Hammett's vibrato more than you like Jimi Hendrix's vibrato. It doesn't really matter. What matters is there's a physicality, and there are elements to the creation of vibrato that are the same no matter what style you prefer. So let's dig into those. The first thing before we get started, I just want to show you a type of vibrato that we're not going to cover today, and that is what I would call violin vibrato. Steve Vai uses this to fantastic result, and obviously violin players do too. I'm basically just changing the pressure of the string, both how hard I'm holding it as well as rocking my sort of contact point back and forth between these two frets to control that vibrato. And again, vibrato is the width of the pitch change, right? The width and the speed of the oscillation. Now, as you can see, I can control the speed really well here, but I can't control the width, right? The only way you really get control of the width is with bending the string. So we're not going to cover violin type vibrato today. We're going to cover more of the sort of rock and roll, electric guitar vibrato, right? The sort of common string bending type of vibrato. So the first thing you need to know is that you are bending the string. I'm changing the tension of the string by sliding it across the fret by bending it. Right? Whether I pull the string down or up, I am changing the tension of the string by sliding it across the fret by bending the note. Right? Here I can control width and speed. Right? I can control both pitch and speed, width of pitch change and speed with this technique of bending the string. Now, when this happens, I'm going to just play a little bit. Notice the headstock and the body of the guitar. There's a lot of movement going on here, right? That's not to be taken for granted. That movement is what is allowing me to really, really dial in and control that width and speed. I'm using that physicality. And what is that physicality? What's going on here really is a pendulum. More like, when you learn how to swing on the swings. You go to the playground, you get in the swing, you push yourself off the swing, right? You push yourself back. The swing pulls, your legs push you back. Gravity starts to pull you back in, and what you do to assist that gravity is you lean back and you shift your mass to accelerate that swing through the bottom. Once you get through the bottom, you shift your mass forward and back to pull the swing back. And you basically work against the reaction of the mass to that physical response. So what you're getting is you move your mass, the swing responds, and you get this sort of elastic movement, right? You've felt this on the playground a million times. That's exactly what's going on here. I'll pull the string down, the guitar will react, right? The guitar physically needs to resolve that tension. So the mass moves. When I move the string back, when I release the tension, the guitar comes back to normal. Right? I'm not doing this. I'm using this fulcrum of the sort of first knuckle of my index finger to support some finger here to move the string, to bend the string, right? And I'm using this as a fulcrum. So I'm really doing a little bit more of a wrist action. And I'm bending that string and the guitar is responding, and then I'm pushing against that response and the guitar is returning, and I'm doing this thing, right? So it's really the same sort of thing where you get this response back and forth. And there's a sweet spot where you can use the weight of the guitar to transfer that energy by releasing and controlling the tension in your hands. Here, let's do it over B. I'm using that tension and release, and I'm finding the physical sweet spot. It's all about sort of internalizing the physicality of this, of what's happening here. For really wide vibrato, the guitar's weight comes into assistance even more. And so that bouncing becomes how you control the weight against that string bend and that extra tension. Even if I try to really lock the guitar down, you can see it moving, right? I can lock it down so it doesn't move, but this is all wrist now. But as soon as I start to put more pressure on it and start to really put some physicality behind it, I can't stop this reaction from happening. So what you do is you lean into that. You learn how to manipulate that and use it to your advantage. Right? Now, let's just talk one more thing about controlling that width and controlling that speed. So, with the width and speed both, you want them to be even. Here's an example of uneven width. Right? It's like, oh, whoa, it's hard to nail down. Right? You want to control that width so it's the same every time. And it's the same with speed. You don't want slow and fast. You want it even. So getting those two things even is what you're after, right? So spend some time really focus in on making sure both of those elements are even, right? They have the same value over and over again. That's that regular, pulsating change of pitch. Regular. You're regulating. You want it to be even. One more thing about speed and width, and that is speed specifically. The more you slow down, the more you have to manufacture the entire motion with your arm. And the more you speed up, the more you transfer that energy into a wrist movement. Arm, wrist. It doesn't matter which finger you use. Faster is more wrist, slower is more arm. Right? I'm really moving my arm more for the slower vibrato and using my wrist more for the faster vibrato. Wrist, arm. And you can see there's a difference in the physicality. When I use my wrist, I'm sort of sidestepping this weight transfer because my oscillation's so fast that the physics don't have time to catch up. And if I go really slow, I really have to control that weight transfer. Turns out there's a sweet spot in the middle somewhere where the natural speed of this weight of this guitar with the tension of these strings sort of gets into a specific speed where I can really leverage the weight of the guitar. And it's right about at that speed. That's where I'm using that weight transfer as much as I can. Okay, so there it is. A couple of elements that no matter what style of vibrato you like, except for that violin example, right? Just the shifting of the pressure. But if you really want to get control over the width of the pitch change, that type of vibrato, this type of vibrato, bending the string rhythmically, is really the way to go, right? And we saw how much physics is actually going on, and comparing it to that pendulum and learning how to swing is really sort of isolating that movement and the physicality of that movement. And when you harness that, that's when your vibrato gets really controllable. You can control that width and you can control that speed in league with what's actually going on physically. Okay, I've got some extra documentation on vibrato. I put that on Patreon. That's linked in the description below. Head on over there if you'd like to see that and get some more information on vibrato. And if you decide to support the channel on Patreon, I thank you in advance. Okay, good vibrato. It's something that you probably want to have. I know I'm always working a little bit on how to tweak it and make sure it sounds as good as I want it to sound, right? These are the elements that you need to work on to make sure that you can bring your vibrato to the place that you want it to be. Okay, I hope this is helpful for you, and I'll see you next time.